For 6 years, I worked tirelessly for his degree. At a tea graduation, he kissed my younger sister. She claimed my true soulmate. He grinned. My parents applauded. Finally, step aside, Laura. At a tea divorce hearing, I handed the judge an envelope. The judge glanced at my family and erupted in laughter. Have you ever felt so completely betrayed, so utterly blindsided, that it felt like your entire life was a lie? Because I sure did. And what made it worse? It wasn't some stranger who ripped my world apart. It was my husband, my sister, and my own parents, all of them, sitting across from me in a courtroom, smiling, while a lawyer called my entire existence stagnant. I can still smell the polish on the wooden benches of that courtroom. It's a smell that's supposed to remind you of justice, of order. But to me, sitting there on that cold, hard chair, it smelled like rot. It smelled like the decaying remains of 8 years of my life. My hands were folded in my lap, squeezed so tight my knuckles were white, trembling despite my best efforts. Across the aisle, the scene was a twisted family portrait. My husband, Dr. Richard Banks, sat tall and proud in a $3,000 Navy suit I'd probably ironed the receipt for. But he wasn't looking at me. His hand rested, almost possessively, on the knee of the woman beside him. A woman in a scandalous red dress that screamed for attention in a place demanding modesty. That woman was Tiffany Miller, my younger sister. And if that wasn't enough to make my stomach churn, right behind them, leaning forward with encouraging smiles, were my parents, Harold and Barbara Miller. My mother was actually patting Richard on the shoulder, whispering something that made him chuckle. My father gave Tiffany a thumbs up. They looked like the perfect, happy family. And I was the stain they were trying to scrub out of their picture. Your Honor, Richard's lawyer began, his voice booming. He was a man Richard had hired using our joint savings, the account I'd built penny by penny. My client, Dr. Banks, is a man of significant standing in the community. His contribution to society as a surgeon is immeasurable. The lawyer paced, casting a dismissive glance my way. On the other hand, the respondent, Mrs. Laura Banks, has maintained, let's call it, a stagnant lifestyle. He adjusted his glasses. She works in a warehouse. She has no higher education. She has contributed minimally to the household's actual social status. To be frank, Your Honor, the marriage has simply outgrown her. Dr. Banks needs a partner who matches his intellectual and social trajectory. Someone like Miss Tiffany Miller, who has been a pillar of support for him. A pillar of support? I felt bile rise in my throat. Tiffany hadn't worked a day in her life. She dropped out of college 3 times. Her support consisted of spending my parents' money on manicures and waiting for Richard to finish the medical school exams I paid for. Therefore, the lawyer concluded, slamming a file onto the table, we are requesting a swift dissolution of the marriage with no alimony. Mrs. Banks is young and able-bodied. She can continue her manual labor. My client is willing to let her keep the 2014 Toyota Corolla. We believe this is more than generous given her lack of contribution to his medical degree. Lack of contribution. I looked at my hands. They were rough, the skin dry and cracked from years of handling cardboard boxes in a warehouse at 4 a.m. From the chemicals I used cleaning offices at night. Every callus on my palm was a receipt for Richard's tuition. Every crack in my skin was a textbook I bought him. I looked up at the judge. Judge Anderson was a stern woman with steel gray hair. She looked bored. She'd probably seen 1,000 divorces just like this. Successful husband, discardable wife. Mrs. Banks, Judge Anderson said, looking at me over her glasses. You are representing yourself today? Yes, Your Honor. My voice came out raspy. I hadn't spoken to anyone in 3 days. Do you have anything to say in response to the petitioner's claims? If not, I am inclined to rule on the motion for summary judgment and end this today. Richard turned to look at me, a smirk playing on his lips. Tiffany giggled, whispering something in his ear. My mother, Barbara, leaned forward and mouthed the words, "Give it up, Laura." The room was silent. The air conditioner hummed. This was it. The moment they all expected me to fold. They expected Laura, the quiet one, the black sheep, the doormat, to just nod, take the old car, and drive off into oblivion so they could play happy family. I took a deep breath. The shaking in my hands stopped. I didn't say a word. I simply stood up. The sound of my chair scraping against the floor echoed like a gunshot. I reached into my battered tote bag, the same bag I used to carry Richard's lunch to the library for 6 years, and pulled out a thick, yellow manila envelope. It was heavy, felt heavier than a brick. It contained the weight of my entire past and the destruction of their future. I walked toward the bench. My heels clicked rhythmically on the floor. Click, click. Richard's smirk faltered slightly. My mother frowned. "I have this, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady and cold as ice. "Before you make your ruling, I believe you need to see this. This is the reason they are all sitting there, and I am standing here." I placed the envelope on the judge's high desk. Judge Anderson looked at the envelope, then at me, then at the nervous family across the aisle. She reached out, her fingers hovering over the clasp. "What is this?" Richard's lawyer demanded, standing up. "We haven't seen this evidence." "Oh, you've seen it?" I said, not looking at him. My eyes locked on Richard. "You just forgot that I kept the receipts." Judge Anderson opened the clasp. The sound of the paper tearing was the loudest thing in the world. But before I tell you what was inside that envelope, and why it made the judge look at my husband and burst out laughing, I have to take you back. You need to understand how a girl who just wanted to be loved ended up funding her own destruction. To understand why I handed that envelope to the judge, you have to understand who I was 8 years ago. I wasn't this woman with the cold eyes and the sharp tongue. Back then, I was Laura, just Laura, the good daughter, the quiet one. I met Richard when we were both 24. I was a junior clerk in a logistics company. He was a biology student with a dream of medical school and holes in his shoes. We met at a laundromat. Typical, right? He was trying to figure out how to get a coffee stain out of his only white shirt before a grad school interview. I showed him how to use baking soda and vinegar. He looked at me with these big, desperate brown eyes and said, "You just saved my life." That was the hook. You saved my life. I had grown up in a house where I was invisible. My sister, Tiffany, 6 years younger, was the miracle baby, the blonde angel, the one who could sing and dance and charm the birds. Out of the trees, I was plain, sturdy Laura. My parents, Harold and Barbara, made it clear early on. Tiffany was destined for greatness. I was destined to be helpful. So, when Richard looked at me like I was a superhero just for cleaning a shirt, I fell hard. We started dating. He was intense. He talked about his future with a passion that was contagious. He wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. He wanted to fix broken things. I thought he wanted to fix me, too. "I'm going to get into med school, Laura," he told me one night, sitting on the floor of his studio apartment, eating instant ramen I had bought. "But the tuition, it's impossible. My credit is shot from undergrad. My parents can't help." He put his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. My heart broke for him. I knew what it was like to have a dream ignored. I wanted to be an accountant, maybe open my own firm one day, but my college fund had been reallocated to pay for Tiffany's modeling classes and voice lessons when I was 18. "I'll help you," I said. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Richard looked up. "What? No, Laura. I can't ask you to do that. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars." "We're a team," I said, moving to sit beside him. "If you get in, I'll work. I'll pick up extra shifts. We can move into a cheaper place. I'll handle the bills. You just study. You become the best doctor in the world." He grabbed my hands and kissed them. "You're an angel," he whispered. "I swear to you, Laura, if you do this for me, I will give you the world. When I'm a doctor, you'll never have to work again. We'll travel. We'll buy a big house. You are the most important person in my life. More important than anyone." I believed him. God, I believed him so much. 6 months later, he got his acceptance letter. We celebrated with a $5 bottle of sparkling wine. That same week, I quit my junior clerk job because the hours weren't flexible enough for the second job I needed. I took a position as a warehouse shift manager, starting at 4 a.m., because it paid overtime. I remember telling my parents the news. We were at Sunday dinner. Tiffany was there, of course, talking loudly about a casting call for a commercial. Richard got into medical school, I announced during a lull in the conversation. My mother, Barbara, looked up from her plate. "Oh, that's nice. Medical school is expensive, isn't it? How is he paying for that?" "I'm going to support us," I said proudly. "I'm taking on extra work so he can focus." My father, Harold, chewed his steak slowly. "Well, that's good of you, Laura. At least you're being useful. A doctor in the family would be a nice change of pace." "Yeah?" Tiffany chimed in, popping a grape into her mouth. "Imagine having a brother-in-law who's a surgeon. That would be so hot. Can he fix my nose if I need it?" "He's going to be an orthopedic surgeon, Tiff," I said. "Bones, not plastic surgery." "Same thing," She waved her hand dismissively. So, does this mean you're going to be poor for like 10 years? It means we're investing in our future, I said, feeling defensive. Well, my mother said, wiping her mouth. Just make sure he actually finishes, Laura. Don't waste your time if he's not smart enough. That night, I went home and applied for a third job, stocking shelves at a grocery store on weekends. I was determined to prove them wrong. I was determined to show them that Richard and I were going to be the power couple of the family. Little did I know I wasn't building a future. I was digging my own grave and handing the shovel to the people I loved most. The first 2 years were hard, but we were happy. Or I thought we were. I was working 60, sometimes 70 hours a week. Richard was studying constantly. I learned to be quiet in our tiny one-bedroom apartment. I learned to walk softly so I wouldn't disturb him. I learned to eat cold dinners standing over the sink so I wouldn't make noise with silverware. But then things started to shift. Subtle changes. The way he looked at my hands, the way he talked about his classmates. And most dangerously, the way my family started looking at him. It started around his 3rd year, when he got his white coat and started his clinical rotations. Suddenly, Richard wasn't just the broke student anymore. He was Dr. Banks in training. And my sister, Tiffany? She noticed. My family dynamic had always been simple. Tiffany was the sun, and the rest of us were just planets orbiting her, hoping to catch a little bit of warmth. Tiffany was 22 when Richard started his clinical rotations. She had dropped out of college again, bored with interior design, and was currently finding herself, while living rent-free in my parents' guest house. She spent her days at the gym, at the salon, or shopping with my mother's credit card. I, on the other hand, looked 10 years older than my actual age. The warehouse shifts were brutal. My back ached constantly. My hands were rough and calloused from lifting heavy boxes. I had stopped buying makeup because every spare dollar went into the tuition fund jar on our kitchen counter. The shift happened at Thanksgiving during Richard's 3rd year. Usually, my parents tolerated Richard, but now that he was wearing scrubs and talking about surgeries, they rolled out the red carpet. Richard, come sit here by me, my mother cooed, patting the seat at the head of the table, a spot usually reserved for my father. Tell us about the hospital. Is it like Grey's Anatomy? Richard beamed. He loved the attention. He launched into a story about a patient with a fractured femur. I was in the kitchen finishing up the gravy and mashing the potatoes because Tiffany didn't want the steam to ruin her blowout. When I finally brought the food out, sweating and tired, nobody looked at me. They were all staring at Richard. And Richard was staring at Tiffany. She was wearing a tight cashmere sweater that looked incredibly soft. She was leaning forward, her chin resting on her hand, listening to Richard with wide, admiring eyes. Wow, Richard, Tiffany breathed. You're so brave. I faint if I see a paper cut. I don't know how you do it. You must have such strong hands. She reached out and touched his forearm. Just a light touch, but I saw Richard flinch. Not away from her, but into her touch. It takes focus, Richard said, his voice dropping an octave. But I like taking care of people. Laura, my father barked, snapping me out of my trance. The gravy is getting cold. Sit down. I sat. I looked at my husband. I picked up that extra shift at the diner for next week. I whispered to him, trying to remind him of our partnership, of our reality. So we can pay for the board exams. Richard frowned, looking annoyed that I had interrupted his moment. Okay, Laura. Great. Can we not talk about money while we're eating? Yeah, Laura, Tiffany laughed. Don't be such a downer. Richard is talking about saving lives. Actually, my mother interjected, looking critically at me. Laura, you look exhausted. And that sweater, is that the one you wore last Christmas? It's pilling. I haven't had time to shop, Mom, I said quietly. I'm working 3 jobs. Well, you should make time, she sniffed. Look at Tiffany. She takes care of herself. A man like Richard needs a wife who presents well. You don't want to embarrass him at hospital functions. Do you? She's fine, Barbara, Richard said. But he didn't look at me. He looked down at his plate. He didn't defend me. He didn't say, she looks this way because she's working herself to death for me. That was the crack in the foundation. Over the next few months, Tiffany started showing up at our apartment. I just needed a quiet place to study my lines for this acting class, she'd say, letting herself in while I was getting ready for my night shift. I would come home at 2 a.m. from cleaning offices, smelling like bleach, and find empty wine glasses in the sink. 2 of them. Oh, Tiffany stopped by, Richard would say vaguely. not looking up from his textbooks. She helped me quiz for the anatomy exam. She's actually pretty smart, you know? She helped you with anatomy? I asked, feeling a cold knot in my stomach. Don't be jealous, Laura. It's pathetic, Richard snapped. She's your sister. She's just being supportive, unlike you, who's always too tired to even ask how my day was. I'm tired because I'm paying the rent, Richard, and I'm studying to give us a future. Stop counting pennies, Laura. You have no vision. The gaslighting had begun. One afternoon, I came home early from the warehouse because I had thrown out my back lifting a crate. I could barely walk. I hobbled into the apartment, hoping Richard could maybe help me with an ice pack. I found them in the living room. Richard was shirtless, doing push-ups. Tiffany was sitting on his back, counting for him, laughing hysterically. 31. 32. Come on, doctor. Push. They froze when they saw me. Laura. Richard scrambled up, his face flushed. You're home early. We were just working out, Tiffany said, sliding off him, smoothing her hair. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed that I had interrupted. On my husband's back? I asked, leaning against the door frame for support. God, Laura. Take a joke. Tiffany rolled her eyes. He said he needed to build stamina for surgery. I was helping. My back is out, I said, tears stinging my eyes. I need help. Richard looked at me. He looked at my messy hair, my work uniform covered in dust, my posture bent with pain. Then he looked at Tiffany, glowing with sweat, vibrant and alive. I have to get back to the library, Richard said coldly, grabbing his shirt. Tiffany, do you want a ride? I can drop you off. Sure, Tiffany smiled. Bye, Laura. Feel better. They left me there. I lay on the floor of the living room I paid for, icing my back with a bag of frozen peas, listening to the silence. I told myself I was crazy. I told myself they were just family. I told myself Richard loved me. But deep down, I knew the thief wasn't breaking into my house in the middle of the night. The thief was invited in, and she was wearing my sister's face. The next 3 years were a blur of exhaustion. I became a machine. I stopped feeling. I just worked. My schedule was brutal. 4 a.m. to 12 p.m., warehouse manager, lifting, shouting, organizing. 1 p.m. to 6 p.m., cashier at the grocery store, standing on my feet, scanning items, forcing a smile for rude customers. 8 p.m. to 11 p.m., cleaning offices, emptying trash cans, scrubbing toilets, vacuuming floors. I was bringing in about $4,000 a month. Every cent went to bills, our rent, Richard's tuition installments, his books, his food, his car insurance, his gas. I kept $50 a month for myself. Just enough for cheap coffee and feminine products. My hands became my biggest insecurity. The chemicals from the cleaning job made my skin peel. The cardboard boxes gave me paper cuts that never healed. My nails were short and brittle. Meanwhile, Richard was transforming. He started his residency. He was tired, yes, but it was a noble tired. He came home smelling of antiseptic and expensive cafeteria coffee. He started buying nice shirts on my credit card, claiming he needed to look the part for the attending surgeons. Image is everything, Laura, he lectured me one morning while I was counting out change for his lunch. You need to understand that in my world, people judge you by your shoes, your watch, your hair. I can't afford a haircut, Richard, I said, wrapping a scarf around my messy bun. Not if you want that new stethoscope. See, that's what I mean. You're so limited. He sighed, taking the money. You have a poverty mindset. Tiffany was saying the other day that you've really let yourself go. You talked to Tiffany about me? She's worried about you, Laura. She thinks you're depressed. She says you're dragging me down. Dragging you down? I slammed my hand on the table. I am holding you up. I am the only reason you are not waiting tables right now. Richard looked at me with cold, dead eyes. You're paying bills, Laura. That's it. Anyone can pay bills. I'm saving lives. There's a difference. Don't act like a martyr. You chose this. I swallowed the scream building in my throat. Just 2 more years, I told myself. When he's in attending, it will be different. He's just stressed. But the distance between us grew into a canyon. He stopped inviting me to hospital events. It's just boring shop talk. You wouldn't understand, he'd say. Later, I'd see photos on Facebook. My parents would be there. Tiffany would be there. So proud of our Richard. My mother would caption a photo of Richard and Tiffany holding champagne flutes. 2 peas in a pod. I confronted my mother about it once. Why is Tiffany at Richard's hospital gala and not me? I asked over the phone, hiding in the supply closet at the warehouse. Oh, Laura, stop whining, my mother snapped. Tiffany has free time. And honestly, she knows how to mingle. You get so awkward in crowds. We're just helping Richard network. You should be thanking your sister for stepping in where you can't. Thanking her for dating my husband in public? But the worst part wasn't the neglect. It was the financial secrecy. In the last year of his residency, I noticed odd withdrawals from our joint account. $200 here, $500 there. Emergency supplies, Richard said. Study materials, he claimed. One day, I found a receipt in his jeans pocket while doing laundry. It wasn't for books. It was for a bracelet. A Swarovski crystal bracelet. Cost $450. My heart stopped. My birthday had passed 2 months ago. I hadn't gotten anything. I waited for him to come home. I put the receipt on the table. Who is this for? I asked, my voice shaking. Richard didn't even blink. He poured himself a glass of water. It's for your mom. Her 60th birthday is coming up. Remember? I wanted to do something nice from both of us. Since you never have time to shop. I felt a wave of relief so strong it almost knocked me over. Of course, it was for Mom. He was being a good son-in-law. Oh, I exhaled. Richard, that's really sweet. I'm sorry. I thought you. You thought what? That I was cheating? He laughed. A cruel, sharp sound. Laura, look at me. I'm a doctor. I work 80 hours a week. Who would I have time for? And honestly, looking at you right now, romance isn't exactly on my mind. I looked down at my stained sweatpants. I felt small. I felt ashamed. Thank you for getting the gift for Mom, I whispered. Just make sure you deposit your check on time this week, he said, walking into the bedroom. I need to pay the fees for my final board exams. I paid the fees. I worked double shifts. I ate expired canned soup. 2 weeks later, at my mother's birthday dinner, I waited for her to open the gift. Richard handed her a box. She opened it. It was a blender. Oh, a Vita Mix, my mother squealed. Thank you, Richard. Laura, I froze. A blender. Then I looked at Tiffany. She was sitting across the table, sipping wine. On her wrist, glittering under the chandelier light, was a Swarovski crystal bracelet. Our eyes met. Tiffany smiled. A slow, cat-like smile. She raised her wrist, adjusting the bracelet, making sure I saw it. I looked at Richard. He was busy cutting his steak, avoiding my gaze. I felt the room spin. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a mockery. They were doing it right in front of me, using my money, laughing at my stupidity. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. But I didn't, because in my head, a desperate, pathetic voice whispered, maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe she bought it herself. Don't ruin the family dinner. Don't be the crazy one. So I sat there. I ate my food. And I let them win. For now. The day Richard graduated from his residency and officially became an attending surgeon was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. It was the finish line. 6 years of hell were over. We had made it. I spent $200, a fortune for me, on a new dress. It was navy blue, modest but elegant. I did my hair. I put on makeup for the first time in months. I looked in the mirror and tried to find the pretty girl Richard had met in the laundromat. She was there, buried under layers of fatigue, but she was there. I drove to the ceremony in our old Toyota. Richard had gone early with my parents and Tiffany in my father's SUV. Not enough room, they had said. When I arrived at the auditorium, I searched for them. I found them in the front row. I tried to squeeze in next to my mother. Laura, there's no space here, my mother hissed, placing her purse on the empty seat next to her. This is for Tiffany's bag. She's wearing silk. She can't hold it on her lap. Go find a seat in the back. Mom, I'm his wife, I whispered, humiliated as people around us watched. Don't cause a scene, my father grumbled. Just go sit somewhere else. You can see him just fine from the balcony. I climbed the stairs to the balcony, alone. I watched my husband walk across the stage from 50 rows back. When they called Dr. Richard Banks, I cheered. I cheered so loud my throat hurt. I was the only one cheering for him up there. Down below, I saw Tiffany jump to her feet, blowing kisses. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the garden. I found Richard surrounded by colleagues and their wives. He looked radiant, powerful. I walked up to him, smiling, reaching for his hand. "Richard, you did it. We did it." He pulled his hand away slightly, adjusting his cuff. "Hey, Laura." "Yeah, thanks." He didn't hug me. He didn't kiss me. He scanned the crowd, looking over my head. "Richard, I'm so proud of you." I tried again. "I was thinking tonight we could." "Richard." A voice cut through the air. Tiffany came bouncing up. She was wearing a white dress, a white lacy dress that looked suspiciously bridal. She looked stunning. "There's my genius," she squealed, throwing her arms around his neck. Richard caught her, spinning her around. He laughed. A genuine, deep laugh I hadn't heard in years. "Hey, Tiff, did you see me up there? You were the hottest one on stage." She giggled. A group of older doctors approached them. One of them, the chief of surgery, smiled at Richard. "Dr. Banks, excellent work today." He looked at Tiffany. "And this must be your wife. You make a striking couple." I stepped forward, opening my mouth to correct him. "Actually, Richard spoke over me. "Thank you, Dr. Henderson. We're very happy." He didn't correct him. He let his boss think Tiffany was his wife. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I stood there, invisible, while Richard introduced Tiffany to the most important people in his career. They laughed. They charmed. They belonged together. I felt a hand on my arm. It was my mother. "Laura," she whispered sharply. "Step back. You're hovering." "Mom." "Richard just let his boss think Tiffany is his wife," I said, my voice trembling with shock. "So?" My mother shrugged. "Look at them, Laura. They look the part. You? Well, look at you. Your dress is wrinkled. Your hands look like a construction worker's. Let Richard have his moment. Don't be selfish." "Selfish?" I choked out. "I paid for this. I paid for this moment." "Lower your voice," my father hissed, appearing on my other side. "You're embarrassing the family. If you can't behave, go wait in the car." Wait in the car. I looked at them. My parents. My husband. My sister. "I'm not a dog." "Then stop barking," my father said coldly. I watched Richard and Tiffany. He was whispering something in her ear. She threw her head back and laughed, touching his chest. He looked at her with such intensity, such hunger, that I had to look away. "She is my true soulmate," I heard Richard say to a colleague. "She understands the pressure. She's been my rock." His rock. I turned around and walked away. I walked out of the garden, past the happy families, past the balloons. I went to the old Toyota Corolla that I had paid off 3 times over, while fixing its engine with duct tape. I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I felt a cold, hard clarity settling in my chest. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't a daughter. I was an investor who had been scammed. But I still needed proof. Absolute, undeniable proof. Because I knew my family. If I accused them without a smoking gun, they would call me crazy. They would gaslight me until I believed I was the villain. I needed to catch them. And I knew exactly where they were going next. My parents had booked a private room at Le Jardin, the most expensive French restaurant in the city, for a family celebration. I wasn't technically uninvited, but the way my father had told me to wait in the car made it clear my presence wasn't desired. I drove home, changed out of my navy dress and into black jeans and a hoodie. I pulled my hair up. I drove to the restaurant and parked across the street. It was raining. A cold, miserable rain that matched the hole in my chest. Walked to the side of the restaurant. The private room had large glass windows that looked out onto a small courtyard. The curtains were drawn, but there was a gap. A gap just wide enough for me to see my life shatter completely. I stood in the wet bushes, shivering, peering through the glass. They were all there. My parents, Richard, and Tiffany. They were drinking champagne. The table was filled with seafood towers and steaks. A meal that cost more than my monthly rent. A meal paid for, I suspected, with the credit card Richard had sworn was maxed out on textbooks. Richard stood up to make a toast. I couldn't hear the words through the glass, but I saw the body language. He raised his glass to my parents. They beamed at him. He turned to Tiffany. The look on his face changed. It softened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath hitched. No, he wouldn't. He couldn't. We were still married. He opened the box. It was a diamond ring, massive. Much bigger than the tiny chip I wore on my finger, a ring I had actually bought for myself at a pawn shop because Richard couldn't afford one when we got engaged. Tiffany shrieked. I saw her mouth form the words, "Oh my God!" She didn't put it on her finger immediately. Instead, Richard took it and slipped it onto a chain around her neck. Promise ring. A secret engagement. Then he leaned in. Right there, in front of my parents, my husband grabbed my sister's face and kissed her. It wasn't a peck. It was a deep, passionate, lover's kiss. I waited for my father to flip the table. I waited for my mother to slap him. I waited for the outrage. Instead, my parents stood up and clapped. My mother wiped a tear from her eye. My father shook Richard's hand vigorously, while Richard still had his arm around Tiffany's waist. The window was slightly open at the top for ventilation. I stepped closer, pressing my ear against the cold brick wall. Finally, I heard my mother's voice. Finally, we can stop pretending. You two are perfect together. I was so worried Laura would ruin tonight, Tiffany said, fingering the diamond on her necklace. She's like a leech. She just won't let go. Don't worry, baby, Richard said. His voice was smooth, confident. I've talked to the lawyer. We'll offer her a small settlement. She's tired. She's broken. She'll take the money and leave. She doesn't have the fight in her. Just make sure it's done quickly, Richard, my father said sternly. We want a real wedding for Tiffany. A big one. Not that courthouse garbage you had with Laura. Step aside, Laura. My mother laughed, clinking her glass with Tiffany's. It's Tiffany's time now. Let them be happy. I felt the vomit rise in my throat. I turned away from the window and retched into the bushes. My stomach heaved until there was nothing left but acid. They had planned this. All of them. My parents weren't just condoning it, they were orchestrating it. They had used me as the pack mule to carry Richard across the finish line. And now that he was a prized stallion, they were handing the reins to Tiffany. I was the surrogate wife, the placeholder, the bank account with a pulse. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. I looked at the window one last time. Richard was feeding Tiffany a strawberry. They looked like monsters. Beautiful, well-dressed monsters. I ran back to my car. I drove blindly, tears finally streaming down my face, blinding me. I screamed until my voice gave out. I didn't go back to the apartment. I knew Richard wouldn't be there anyway. He would be at my parents' house, in the guest room with Tiffany. I drove to the only place I could think of, the 24-hour warehouse where I worked. I sat in the parking lot, staring at the gray concrete building that had stolen my youth. She doesn't have the fight in her, Richard had said. He was right. I didn't have any fight left in me. I was empty. But as the sun began to rise over the industrial park, casting long shadows across the asphalt, I realized something. Nature abhors a vacuum. When you empty a person of love, hope, and kindness, something else rushes in to fill the void. Rage. Cold, calculating, nuclear rage. I wasn't going to just take the money and leave. I was going to burn their perfect little world to the ground. But first, I had to give them one last chance to hang themselves. I waited until the next afternoon. I knew Sunday lunch was a ritual at my parents' house. I drove over there, my eyes dry and gritty from lack of sleep. I walked in without knocking. I still had a key, though I suspected not for long. They were in the living room. The scene was domestic bliss. Richard was reading the paper. Tiffany was painting her nails. My mother was arranging flowers. They all froze when I walked in. I looked like a wreck. Same clothes as yesterday. Hair wild, eyes red. Laura, my mother said, putting down a rose. Her tone was annoyed, not concerned. You look terrible. Where have you been? Richard was worried. Was he? I looked at Richard. He didn't look worried. He looked caught. Were you worried, Richard? Or were you busy celebrating with your soulmate? The room went deadly silent. Tiffany stopped painting her nails. I don't know what you're talking about, Richard said, standing up. You're acting crazy again. I saw you, I said quietly. At Le Jardin. I saw the ring. I saw the kiss. I saw you clapping, Mom, Dad. I looked at my parents. You cheered for him cheating on your own daughter. My father sighed and put down his coffee mug. He didn't look ashamed. He looked like he was dealing with a difficult toddler. Sit down, Laura, he commanded. No, look. My mother stepped forward, her face hard. Since you know, we can stop the charade. Yes, Richard and Tiffany are in love. They have been for a long time. We support it because, well, look at them, Laura. They make sense. You and Richard, it was always a mismatch. A mismatch. I laughed. A broken sound. I paid for his degree. I paid for his food. I paid for the shirt on his back. And we appreciate that, Richard said, stepping next to Tiffany, his hand resting on her shoulder. I'm grateful, Laura. I really am. But gratitude isn't love. I've evolved. I'm a surgeon now. I need a partner who understands that lifestyle. Tiffany, she fits in. You refuse to change. I refuse to change? I stared at him. I worked 3 jobs so you wouldn't have to work one. I destroyed my body for you. That was your choice? Tiffany chimed in, blowing on her nails. Nobody forced you to be a workhorse, Laura. You like being a victim. It's your thing. Richard needs someone fun. Someone alive. You're my sister. I whispered. How could you do this? Tiffany shrugged. We can't help who we love. Besides, you always knew you were the practice wife. Everyone knew. The cruelty took my breath away. Practice wife. Here's the deal, Richard said, his voice businesslike. I want a divorce. I've already drawn up the papers. Since the apartment is in my name. We paid for that apartment together. I screamed. The lease is in my name. Richard corrected. And since you contributed cash, there's no paper trail. Legally, it's mine. But I'm not a monster. I'll give you $10,000. You keep the Corolla. You sign the papers and you walk away. You can start over somewhere cheaper. Take the deal, Laura. Don't be difficult, my father said. If you fight this, Richard has expensive lawyers. You have nothing. You'll lose everything. Just take the money and go. And the dog? I asked. Buster, our golden retriever. The only thing that had kept me sane. Tiffany loves Buster, Richard said. We're keeping him. He likes the yard here better anyway. They were taking my husband, my dignity, my home, my money, and my dog. I looked at them, my family, the people who were supposed to protect me. They were a pack of wolves and I was the injured deer. You're disgusting, I said. All of you, get out. My mother pointed to the door. If you're going to be abusive, leave. We're trying to have a nice Sunday. I'll leave, I said. But you're going to regret this. I promise you. Oh, Laura, Tiffany laughed. What are you going to do? You're a warehouse worker. Go move boxes. Leave the thinking to the smart people. I walked out. I got into my Toyota. I drove away. I didn't have a plan yet. I just had pain. So much pain it felt like my blood was boiling. That night, I slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot. I didn't have the $10,000 yet, and Richard had locked me out of our accounts. I had $42 in my pocket. I checked Facebook on my phone. Tiffany had posted a photo. It was her hand, wearing the diamond ring, resting on Richard's chest. Caption: finally official. True love waits. Hashtag future Mrs. Banks. Hashtag soulmate. Hashtag blessed. My mother had commented, so happy for my beautiful daughter and handsome son. A match made in heaven. I stared at the screen. The blue light illuminated my tear-stained face in the dark car. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a break. It was a fusion. My sadness hardened into steel. I remembered something. A woman who came into the grocery store where I worked on Saturdays. She always bought expensive wine and cat food. She was sharp, dressed in power suits. And once, when a manager was rude to me, she had verbally destroyed him in 3 sentences. She had given me her card once. You're too smart for this place, she had said. If you ever need legal advice, call me. I specialize in difficult cases. I dug through my glove compartment, throwing out old napkins and straw wrappers. Finally, I found it. A bent, coffee-stained business card. Catherine Stone, Family Law and Asset Recovery. I looked at the time. 11 p.m. I didn't care. I dialed the number. I didn't expect her to answer. It was Sunday night. This is Catherine. A voice rasped on the other end. She sounded awake, alert. Miss Stone? I asked, my voice cracking. My name is Laura Banks. I scan your groceries on Saturdays. You gave me your card. There was a pause. The girl with the sad eyes and the fast hands. I remember. Why are you calling me at midnight, Laura? My husband, he's a surgeon. I paid for his school. He just left me for my sister. My parents are helping him. He locked me out of the house. He offered me $10,000 to disappear. Silence. Then I heard the sound of a lighter clicking, followed by a long exhale. Did you sign anything? Catherine asked sharply. No. Good. Where are you? Walmart parking lot. In my car. Drive to my office. 4th Street. I'm usually there until 2 a.m. Bring everything you have. Phone, receipts, laptop, scraps of paper, everything. I can't afford you, I stammered. I have $40. Laura. Catherine's voice dropped. I hate cheaters. But do you know what I hate more? Parents who eat their young. Get your ass over here. We'll talk about money when we're counting your husband's assets. I drove. Catherine's office looked like a war room. Files everywhere. She was a small woman in her 50s with short, spiky gray hair and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. She listened to my story. She didn't interrupt. She didn't offer me a tissue when I cried. She just took notes, furious, rapid notes. When I finished telling her about the blessing dinner and the fake lease, she leaned back in her chair. Okay, she said. Here's the situation. They think you're weak. They think you're stupid. They think because the money came from cash tips and overtime it can't be traced. They're wrong. She stood up and walked to a whiteboard. She wrote, Operation Scorched Earth. First, she said, we need proof of the financial infidelity. You said you handled the bills. Yes, for 6 years. I have all the passwords. He never changed them because he thinks I'm too tech illiterate to figure out online banking. Catherine smiled. It was a shark smile. Perfect. Log in. Now. We spent the next 4 hours downloading everything. Bank statements, credit card histories, Venmo transactions. And that's when we found it. Wait, I said, squinting at the screen. What is this transfer? Consulting fee? Richard had transferred $5,000 to an account named TM Designs 2 years ago. Then another. TM, Catherine muttered. Tiffany Miller. She doesn't have a design business, I said. She dropped out. Look at the dates, Catherine pointed. Every time he transferred money to her, it matches a withdrawal from your joint savings account for tuition. Your tuition money. My blood ran cold. He wasn't paying tuition. He took out student loans for the tuition. Laura, Catherine said, her eyes widening as she cross-referenced the loan documents we found in his email. See, he took the full loan amount, but he told you he didn't get the loan, so you had to pay cash. I felt dizzy. So, where did my money go? He was pocketing your money, Catherine said, typing furiously. He was taking your cash, pretending to pay the school, but actually funneling it into a secret account. And look who is the co-signer on that secret account. She turned the screen toward me. Account holder, Richard Banks. Authorized user, Barbara Miller. My mother, I gasped. My mother helped him steal from me. It gets worse, Catherine said, clicking on a folder named Property Deed in his cloud storage. Do you recognize this address? 550 Riverview Drive. That's the luxury condo my parents bought as an investment property last year. They said they were renting it out. Read the deed, Laura. I leaned in. Owners. Richard Banks and Tiffany Miller. They didn't buy it, Catherine said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. Richard bought it with the money he stole from you over 6 years, and he put Tiffany's name on it. Your parents just pretended it was theirs to cover the trail. I sat back, the room spinning. It wasn't just an affair. It was a long con, a 6-year heist. My husband, my sister, and my parents had built a luxury life for themselves using my sweat, my back pain, and my stolen dreams. They legally own $1 million condo, I whispered, and I'm sleeping in a car. Catherine stood up and slammed her hand on the desk. Not for long, Laura. Wipe those tears. We aren't going to just divorce him. We are going to send him to prison. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a fresh yellow manila envelope. We are going to put every single piece of this evidence into this envelope, Catherine said. And we are going to wait. We won't say a word. We let them think they've won. We let them walk into that courtroom arrogant and proud. She handed me the envelope. And when the moment is right, she said, you are going to bury them. And that brings us back to the courtroom, to the moment Judge Anderson opened the clasp. But what happened right before that moment, in Catherine's office in the middle of the night, changed everything. The discovery of a life insurance policy, late that night, changed the temperature of the room. Catherine's office, usually a sanctuary of controlled chaos, suddenly felt cold. We weren't just looking at a divorce case anymore. We were looking at a timeline that ended with my funeral. They bet on your death, Catherine had said. But as we sat there under the buzzing fluorescent lights, digging deeper into the digital paper trail, a terrifying question began to form in the back of my mind. If you bet on a horse to lose, you don't just watch the race. You hamstring the horse. Catherine, I said, my voice barely audible over the hum of the computer server. Go back to the credit card statements. The ones from last year. Which ones? The jewelry store? The flights? No. The pharmacy. The compounding pharmacy on 4th Street. Catherine clicked through the files. Here. November. December. Recurring charges of $85. Why? I felt a phantom wave of nausea roll over me, a sensation I had grown intimately familiar with over the last 2 years. Richard started bringing me vitamins last year. He said I looked pale. He said my warehouse shifts were depleting my iron levels. He insisted I take them every morning. He watched me take them. Catherine turned slowly in her chair to face me. Her eyes were sharp, dangerous. And how did those vitamins make you feel, Laura? Tired, I whispered. So tired. I thought it was the work, but it was a heavy tiredness. Brain fog. Some days I couldn't remember if I locked the door. I felt clumsy. I tripped on the stairs twice. Richard told me I was developing early onset vertigo. He diagnosed me. He's an orthopedic surgeon, not a neurologist. Catherine snapped. She grabbed her phone and dialed a number. It's 4 a.m., but I don't care. I need a favor. She spent the next 10 minutes speaking in rapid-fire legal jargon to someone on the other end. When she hung up, she looked at me with an intensity that frightened me. We need a hair follicle test. Now, the lab opens at 6 a.m. My contact is going to rush it. You think he was drugging me? The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I think a man who takes out $1 million insurance policy on his wife, forges a deed to make himself the beneficiary of her assets, and then insists on administering daily, specialized medication is not doing it out of love. I think he was keeping you weak. I think he was prepping you for an accident that would cash out that policy. We spent the hours before dawn not sleeping, but strategizing. Catherine was a machine. She pulled my parents' financial records next. We needed to understand why. Why would a mother and father sell out their own daughter? The answer was pathetic and simple. Gambling. Look at this. Catherine pointed to Harold Miller's bank history. Your father didn't just have a bad investment. He has a gambling addiction. Online poker, sports betting. He lost the house 3 years ago, Laura. But they still live there, I said. They're months away from foreclosure. They needed a bailout. Richard promised them a bailout. He paid off their immediate debts with your tuition money, and in exchange they gave him you. They gave him your credit score, your labor, and your blind trust. My mother knew. The realization hit me harder than the drug accusation. My mother knew I was being bled dry, and she held the bucket. All those times she told me I looked tired and haggard, she wasn't concerned. She was monitoring the effects of the poison. At 6 a.m. we went to the lab. The technician cut a lock of hair from the back of my head. We'll know in 24 hours, Catherine said as we walked out into the gray morning light. If this comes back positive for sedatives or heavy metals, Richard Banks is never seeing the light of day again. But the universe wasn't done throwing punches. As I walked to my car in the parking lot, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my employer, the warehouse. Urgent disciplinary hearing required regarding missing inventory. I froze. Catherine looked at the text over my shoulder. Missing inventory? I managed the high-value cage. Electronics. Laptops. Nothing has ever gone missing on my watch. Until today, Catherine said grimly. They know you're up to something, Laura. Or they're just trying to destroy your credibility before the divorce hearing. If you're fired for theft, you look like a criminal. It ruins your character witness. Richard knows my boss, I realized. They play golf together. Of course they do. Catherine checked her watch. You go to that meeting. You deny everything. Do not sign anything. I'm going to make a phone call to the district attorney. We need to accelerate the timeline. We can't wait 2 weeks for the hearing. We need to file for an emergency injunction. I have to go back to work? I asked, panic rising in my throat. You have to act normal. Catherine gripped my shoulders. Laura, listen to me. You are walking into the lion's den, but you are the one with the hidden knife. Let them fire you. Let them smear you. It just adds to the damages lawsuit. Every horrible thing they do to you now is just another zero on the check they will write you later. I drove to the warehouse. My hands were shaking on the wheel. Not from weakness, but from a rage so pure it felt like rocket fuel. They had taken my past. They had tried to take my future. Now they were trying to take my dignity. I walked into the warehouse manager's office. My boss, a man named Steve who I had covered shifts for a dozen times, wouldn't meet my eyes. Laura, he said, shuffling papers. We did an audit this morning. 3 MacBooks are missing from your cage. The log shows your keycard was used at 3 a.m. I was with my lawyer at 3 a.m., I said calmly. Steve flinched. Lawyer? Look, we don't want to get the police involved. If you just sign this resignation letter admitting to the error, we'll let it go. We won't press charges. He slid a paper across the desk. It was typed up, ready to go. Admission of guilt. Richard wrote this, didn't he? I asked. Steve turned red. This isn't about your husband. This is about theft. I'm not signing it. Then you're fired for cause and we will be filing a police report. Do it. I stood up. File the report. Check the cameras, Steve. Oh wait, the cameras in the cage have been malfunctioning lately, haven't they? Convenient. I ripped the badge off my shirt and threw it on his desk. I quit. And Steve, when the subpoena comes for your golf logs with Richard, don't lie. Perjury is a felony. I walked out. I had no job. I had no home. I was living in a car. But as I walked into the sunlight, I checked my phone. Catherine had sent a text. Lab results preliminary. Positive for benzodiazepines. High levels. You were being drugged, Laura. Come back to the office. It's time to drop the hammer. The positive drug test was the turning point. It shifted the narrative from a sad story about a woman scorned to a thriller about attempted murder. Catherine wanted to go to the police immediately, but we hit a snag. The police would arrest Richard, yes, but the assets, the money, the condo, the hidden accounts, would be frozen in evidence for years. We need him to sign a divorce settlement, admitting the assets are marital, before the handcuffs go on, Catherine explained, pacing her office like a caged tiger. If he goes to jail now, the government seizes the assets as proceeds of crime. You might get nothing. We need to get the title transferred to you first. How? I asked. He thinks he's winning. He won't sign anything. We bait him. Catherine smiled, a cold, predatory smile. We requested a mediation session tomorrow. We tell him, you're broken. You're fired. You're homeless. You're ready to take the $10,000 and disappear. We get him in a room. We get him arrogant. And we get him to sign an admission of the assets just to get rid of you. And then, once the ink is dry and the property is legally yours, we hand the envelope to the judge at the final hearing and send him to prison. The mediation was set for a sterile conference room in a high-rise downtown. Richard hired the most expensive firm in the city, of course. I wore my oldest clothes. I didn't wear makeup. I let the dark circles under my eyes show. I wanted to look like the defeated, pathetic creature they believed I was. When I walked in, Richard was already there. He was sitting at the head of the long mahogany table, checking his watch. Tiffany was next to him, wearing a white blazer, looking like she was playing the role of the supportive CEO wife. My parents were there, too, sitting in the corner like a Greek chorus of disapproval. You're late, Richard said without looking up. I had to park far away, I said, keeping my voice small. I couldn't afford the garage. Tiffany snickered. Pathetic. Catherine sat next to me. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a single thin file. My client is tired, Dr. Banks. She wants this over. Richard's lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Sterling, smiled patronizingly. A wise decision. We have prepared a settlement agreement. Laura receives $10,000. She keeps the 2014 Toyota. She waives all rights to alimony, the condo on Riverview Drive, and any future earnings of Dr. Banks. In exchange, Dr. Banks agrees not to sue her for, let's call it, emotional distress caused by her erratic behavior. Emotional distress? I looked up, letting my lip tremble. Richard, you drugged me. The room went silent. Richard froze. Excuse me? Mr. Sterling laughed nervously. That is a serious accusation. I felt so tired all the time, I whispered, looking at Richard. The vitamins? You said they would help, but I just got weaker. Richard leaned forward, his eyes cold and dead. You are tired because you're depressed, Laura. You're projecting. This is exactly why we need this divorce. You're delusional. Do you want the $10,000 or not? Because if you keep talking crazy, I'll walk out and you get nothing. And the warehouse? I asked. Did you tell Steve to fire me? Steve is a friend. Richard shrugged. He told me you were stealing. I just advised him to protect his business. You brought that on yourself. My mother spoke up from the corner. Just sign it, Laura. Take the money. Go stay with Aunt Linda in Nebraska. Start over. You're not cut out for this city. We want the condo, Catherine said suddenly. Richard laughed. A loud, barking laugh. The condo? It's worth $1.2 million. It's in my name and Tiffany's name. Laura didn't pay a dime for it. Actually, Catherine said, sliding a paper across the table. We know about the loan fraud. We know Laura co-signed. Richard's face twitched. He looked at his lawyer. If you give her the condo, Catherine lied smoothly, she will sign a non-disclosure agreement. She won't report the loan irregularity to the bank. She won't report the vitamin issue to the medical board. She just wants a home. You keep your practice, your reputation, and your girlfriend. Laura gets a roof over her head. Richard whispered to his lawyer. They argued in hushed tones. He can't give her the condo, Tiffany hissed. That's my house. I picked out the curtains. Shut up, Tiffany, Richard snapped. He turned back to me. He looked at me with pure contempt. He calculated. He figured he could make another $1 million in a year as a surgeon. But a fraud investigation? That would ruin him. Fine, Richard said. She gets the condo, but she takes the mortgage debt too. And she signs the NDA. I never want to hear her name again. Deal, Catherine said. Mr. Sterling quickly printed a new page. Transfer of deed pending final decree. Non-disclosure agreement regarding all financial and medical matters. Effective immediately. I picked up the pen. My hand shook. This time it was acting. I just want this to be over. I whimpered. It's over, Laura, Richard said, watching me sign. You won. You got the house. Now get out of my life. I signed. Richard signed. Tiffany signed reluctantly, digging the pen into the paper. As we walked to the elevator, Richard called out, Hey, Laura. I turned. Don't think you beat me, he smirked. You're getting a house you can't afford. The property taxes alone will bankrupt you in a year. You'll be back in that warehouse sweeping floors before Christmas. I didn't answer. The elevator doors closed. As soon as we were alone in the metal box, Catherine slumped against the wall and let out a long breath. We got him, she said. He signed the transfer, I said, holding the copy. The condo is marital property now, legally. And the NDA? I asked. I signed it. I can't report him. Catherine grinned. An NDA that covers illegal acts is void ab initio. You can't contractually agree to hide a felony. He just signed a confession that he owns the condo to keep you quiet about fraud. He handed us the evidence of his own coercion. So, the police are going to love this, Catherine said. But we wait for the final hearing. We let the judge invalidate the NDA on public record. We let him think he's safe for 48 more hours. I went back to my car that night, but I didn't sleep. I sat with the folder. I had the deed. I had the toxic report. I had the life insurance policy. I thought about Richard's smirk. You're getting a house you can't afford. He didn't realize that the price of that house wasn't money. The price was his freedom, and he had just paid in full. The day before the final hearing, my family decided to twist the knife one last time. I received a text from my father, Laura. Come by the house. We need to pick up the rest of your boxes from the attic. We're clearing everything out for Tiffany's things. It was a trap. I knew it, but I also knew I needed one last piece of evidence. The life insurance policy's original document. Gary, the whistleblower, said my father kept the physical copy in his safe. If I could get that, the case went from circumstantial to ironclad. I drove to my childhood home. The house looked the same, perfectly manicured lawn, the white picket fence, the facade of the American dream, rotting from the inside. I walked in. My mother was in the kitchen packing boxes. My boxes, my old yearbooks, my clothes from high school, my trophies, the few I had. There she is, my mother said without turning around. The homeowner. I hope you're happy, Laura. You blackmailed your sister out of her house. It wasn't her house, Mom. It was bought with my money. Money, money, money? My father walked in, shaking his head. That's all you care about. You've become so bitter. Where is Richard? I asked. He's at the hospital working like a responsible adult, my father said. Listen, Laura, we're disappointed in you, but we're family. We want to offer you an olive branch. He gestured to the dining table. There was a pie, apple pie, my favorite. Sit down, my mother said, her voice softening. Let's have some pie for old time's sake. Before you go live in your big, lonely tower. I looked at the pie. I looked at my mother. Did Richard give you the recipe for this pie? I asked. My mother froze. What? The vitamins? I said. The ones that made me sleepy. Did you put them in the pie, too? My father's face went red. How dare you? We are trying to be nice. I'm not hungry, I said. I just want my boxes. They're in the study. My father grunted. Go get them yourself. I walked into the study. This was it. The safe was behind the painting of the ship, just like in a bad movie. My father was predictable. I knew the combination. It was Tiffany's birthday, June 14th, 95. I waited until I heard them arguing in the kitchen. She's suspicious, Harold. She knows something. She doesn't know anything. She signed the NDA. She's just being a brat. I turned the dial. Click, click, click. The safe opened. Inside, there were stacks of cash, passports, and a blue folder. I opened the folder. Credential Life Insurance. Insured, Laura Banks. Beneficiary, the Miller Family Trust. There it was. I pulled out my phone and took photos of every page. I couldn't take the physical file. They would know. I put it back. I closed the safe. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had the last nail. As I walked back into the kitchen, Tiffany walked in through the back door. She was holding a wedding magazine. Oh! She stopped when she saw me. You're here. Gross. Hi, Tiffany, I said. I felt strangely calm. I had the photos. I had the power. I hope you enjoy the condo, Tiffany sneered. It has bad energy anyway. Richard and I are going to build a new house, a bigger one on the lake with the money he makes this year. I'm sure you will, I said. You should start packing for that trip. What trip? The long one, I said. My mother slammed a box onto the counter. Just take your trash and leave, Laura. And don't come back until you've apologized to your sister. I'm sorry, Tiffany, I said, looking her dead in the eye. Tiffany looked surprised. You are. I'm sorry that you never learned how to do anything but take, I said. Because where you're going, there's nothing to take. What is that supposed to mean? Tiffany demanded. It means, I said, picking up my box of yearbooks, that the Bank of Laura is closed permanently. I walked out the door. As I reached my car, Richard pulled into the driveway. He blocked me in. He got out of his BMW, looking furious. I heard you were here, he said, walking up to my window. What are you doing? Snooping? Getting my things? Like we agreed. He leaned in, his face inches from mine. I could smell his expensive cologne. It used to make me weak in the knees. Now it just smelled like deception. Listen to me, he hissed. You got the condo. You got your little victory. But if you ever try to speak to anyone about the loans or the pills or anything, I will destroy you. I know people. I can have you committed. I can make you disappear. Is that a threat, Richard? It's a prognosis. He smiled cruelly. I'm a doctor. I know how fragile the human body is, especially yours. Drive safe, Laura. He patted the roof of my car and walked away. I watched him go into the house. I watched him hug Tiffany. I watched my parents welcome him like the son they never had. I drove away. My hands weren't shaking this time. I drove straight to the police station. I met Catherine there. We didn't file the report yet. Catherine had a friend in the district attorney's office, a prosecutor named Marcus, who hated white-collar fraud. We showed him the photos of the insurance policy. We showed him the toxicology report. We showed him the forged deed. Marcus looked at the file. He looked at me. This is substantial, he said. We can get a warrant, but if you want to see them squirm, if you want to see them destroy each other on public record, do the hearing tomorrow. Let them lie under oath. Let them commit perjury in front of a judge. Then we arrest them. Will you be there? I asked. I'll be in the back row, Marcus promised. With 2 detectives. I slept in a hotel that night. Catherine insisted. You need a good night's sleep. Tomorrow is showtime. I lay in the clean, white bed. I thought about Richard's threat. I can make you disappear. He was wrong. I wasn't disappearing. I was finally coming into focus. The courtroom was packed. Apparently, a divorce involving a prominent surgeon and $1 million dispute draws a crowd. Or maybe my family had invited people, expecting to humiliate me one last time. I sat alone at the plaintiff's table. Catherine was beside me, arranging her stacks of paper with geometric precision. Richard sat with his lawyer, Mr. Sterling. Tiffany was in the front row wearing a cream-colored suit that screamed innocence. My parents were behind her. They looked annoyed, checking their watches as if this whole proceeding was a minor inconvenience to their lunch plans. Judge Anderson entered. She looked tired. She clearly expected this to be a routine finalizing of a settlement. Case 4920, Banks versus Banks. The bailiff announced. Your Honor. Mr. Sterling stood up. We have reached a settlement agreement. The parties have signed. We are just here to formalize the decree and verify the asset division. I see. Judge Anderson flipped through the file. The wife receives the property at 550 Riverview Drive and assumes all debt and waives alimony. Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Banks. The judge looked at me. Do you understand this agreement? You are taking on a significant mortgage. I stood up. I understand, Your Honor, but before we finalize, there is a matter of clarification regarding the assets. Clarification? Richard snapped from his seat. We signed it. It's done. Mr. Sterling, control your client, the judge warned. Catherine stood up. Your Honor, my client signed the agreement under duress. Specifically, she signed it because Dr. Banks threatened to use his medical influence to have her committed, and because she was recovering from long-term sedation administered by him without her consent. The courtroom gasped. A low murmur rippled through the gallery. Objection! Mr. Sterling shouted. This is slander. There is an NDA. Ah, yes, the NDA. Catherine smiled. Your Honor, we would like to submit the NDA into evidence. Specifically, the clause where Dr. Banks agrees to transfer the property in exchange for Mrs. Banks's silence regarding financial irregularities and medical treatments. Catherine handed the document to the bailiff. Judge Anderson read it. Her eyes narrowed. Mr. Sterling, did you draft this? My client insisted on certain protections. Sterling stammered, sweating. This reads like a hush-money contract, the judge said. Dr. Banks, stand up. Richard stood, adjusting his tie. He looked confident, still believing his charm would work. Dr. Banks, did you purchase the property at Riverview Drive with marital funds? No, Your Honor. Richard lied smoothly. It was an investment by my in-laws. They gifted a portion to me and Tiffany. Laura had nothing to do with it. And the loan documents bearing her signature? She co-signed to help her parents. She knew exactly what she was doing. So, you deny forging her signature or swapping the pages? Absolutely, Richard said, looking insulted. I am a surgeon. I save lives. I don't forge papers. And the vitamins? The judge asked. Did you administer sedatives to your wife? Never. I gave her iron supplements. She is hysterical, Your Honor. This is why I wanted the NDA, to stop her from spreading these crazy conspiracy theories. I looked at the back of the room. Marcus, the prosecutor, was taking notes. The detectives were moving closer to the doors. So, to be clear, the judge said, leaning forward. You swear under penalty of perjury that you did not defraud your wife, you did not poison her, and you did not conspire with her parents to steal her assets? I swear, Richard said, placing his hand on the Bible that sat on the clerk's desk. And you, Miss Miller? The judge looked at Tiffany. Do you swear the same? Tiffany stood up, looking nervous. I swear Laura is just jealous because Richard loves me. And Mr. and Mrs. Miller? My parents stood up. We just wanted to help our children, my father said. Laura is the problem here. Catherine touched my arm. Now, I picked up the heavy yellow envelope. Your Honor, I said, walking to the bench, since everyone has sworn under oath, I would like to introduce Exhibit A through Z. This is the timeline of the truth. I handed over the envelope. Judge Anderson opened it. She saw the toxicology report first. Benzodiazepines, she read aloud. 50 times the therapeutic dose. Richard's face went white. She turned the page. A report from the Notary Public Commission confirming the stamp on the deed was stolen and the date is falsified. My father grabbed his chest. This time he wasn't faking. She turned the page. A copy of a life insurance policy on Laura Banks dated 5 years ago. Beneficiary. The Miller Trust, she read, her voice tightening. With a text message from Harold Miller to Richard Banks dated last week. When does the policy mature? We need the cash. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb about to go off. Judge Anderson looked up. She wasn't laughing this time. She was trembling with fury. Dr. Banks, she said, her voice a low growl. You just lied to my face. You lied to the court. And you seemingly attempted to murder your wife by slow poisoning while betting on her death. No, Richard shouted. That's fake. She forged it. This toxicology report is from the state lab. The judge slammed the paper down. Bailiff, lock the doors. Chaos erupted. Tiffany tried to run for the aisle. My mother started screaming. There is a prosecutor in the room, Catherine announced, pointing to Marcus. Marcus stood up, flashing his badge. District Attorney's Office. Dr. Banks, Harold Miller, Barbara Miller, Tiffany Miller. You are all under arrest. For what? Tiffany shrieked as a detective grabbed her arm. Fraud, forgery, perjury, conspiracy to commit murder, and grand larceny. Marcus listed them off like a grocery list. Richard tried to fight. He shoved Mr. Sterling into a detective. Get off me. I'm a doctor. I have surgeries. Not anymore, the detective said, slamming him against the table and clicking the handcuffs on. I stood there, watching the man who had promised to love me forever being dragged away like a common criminal. My mother looked at me as she was cuffed. Laura, tell them we're your parents. I don't have parents, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. I have defendants. The hearing didn't end with the arrests. That was just the intermission. Because the fraud was so extensive, the divorce case was paused while the criminal case took precedence. But Judge Anderson issued an emergency order granting me full control of all disputed assets pending the trial. I moved into the Riverview condo the next day, not to live there, but to secure it. Walking into that place was surreal. It smelled like Tiffany's perfume. Her clothes were still in the closet. Richard's medical journals were on the coffee table. It was a museum of their stolen life. I hired a cleaning crew to box everything up. I sent Tiffany's clothes to Goodwill. I sent Richard's books to the prison library. Petty move maybe, but it felt good. The criminal trial took 6 months. Catherine and I were the star witnesses. We laid out the 6-year scam day by day. The jury was horrified by the medical poisoning. The toxicology expert testified that if I had continued taking Richard's vitamins for another 6 months, my liver would have failed. It would have looked like natural causes. He wasn't just stealing her money, the prosecutor told the jury in his closing statement. He was erasing her existence. The verdict came back in 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was the final act. I was allowed to give a victim impact statement. I walked to the podium. Richard was in an orange jumpsuit. He looked gaunt. He had lost his hair. Stress, probably. Tiffany was weeping silently. My parents looked old and frail. For 6 years, I began looking at Richard. I thought I wasn't enough. I thought I was too simple, too poor, too plain. I thought if I just worked harder, if I just gave more, you would finally love me. I paused. But you couldn't love me because you can't love something you plan to consume. You didn't marry a wife, Richard. You acquired an asset. You used me up like a battery. And when I was empty, you planned to throw me away. I turned to my parents. And you? You were supposed to be my safety net. Instead, you were the trap. You sold me for a condo. You sold me for a lifestyle. I hope, I concluded, that when you are sitting in your cells, you remember the taste of the apple pie you tried to feed me. I hope you remember that I was the one who would have taken care of you when you were old. I was the one who would have visited. Now you have each other, and you have nothing else. The judge was merciless. Richard Banks, sentenced to 25 years for attempted murder via poisoning, bank fraud, and conspiracy. Harold and Barbara Miller, sentenced to 10 years each for insurance fraud and conspiracy. Tiffany Miller, sentenced to 5 years for grand larceny and fraud. She turned on the others to get a lighter sentence, admitting she knew about the money laundering. As the gavel came down, Richard lunged at the glass partitions separating us. You ruined my life, he screamed, spit flying. I was a surgeon. I was a god. You are a parasite, I said softly. The guards dragged him away. That was the last time I saw his face. After the trial, the assets were liquidated. The condo was sold. The hidden accounts were seized and returned to me as restitution. The life insurance policy was voided. I walked out of the courthouse a wealthy woman. Millions in assets recovered. But I felt heavy. I drove to the cemetery, not to visit a grave, but to bury someone metaphorically. I stood under a large oak tree and buried my wedding ring. I buried the tuition funds jar I had kept as a souvenir. Goodbye, Laura the doormat, I whispered. Hello, Laura the survivor. It has been 3 years since the heavy steel doors slammed shut on my family. People ask me if I miss them. They ask, how can you live without your parents, your sister? I tell them the truth. I was living without them long before they went to prison. I was living with ghosts who ate my food and spent my money. Now I just don't have to pay for their haunting. I didn't stay in the city. Too many memories. Too many shadows on the street corners where I used to work. I moved north. I bought that cottage by the ocean I told you about. I named it the Sanctuary. The money allowed me to heal. Real healing. I spent a year in therapy untangling the knots of guilt and worthlessness my parents had tied in my soul. I learned that no is a complete sentence. I learned that my value isn't calculated by how much pain I can endure. I opened my bakery, the Golden Hour. It's named after that time of day right before sunset when everything looks magical. That's how I feel about my life now. I'm in my golden hour. I have employees, 3 young women who are working their way through college. I pay them double the minimum wage. I pay for their textbooks. I make sure they never have to choose between eating and studying. One of them, a girl named Maya, reminds me of myself. She's studying nursing. She works hard. She has a boyfriend who waits for her in the parking lot. Last week, I saw him yelling at her because she was 5 minutes late. I saw her shrink back, trying to make herself small. I walked out there. Maya, I said, take the rest of the day off. And you, I looked at the boy, get off my property. If you ever raise your voice at her again, I will introduce you to my friend Catherine. She eats boys like you for breakfast. He drove off. Maya cried. We sat on the curb and ate cinnamon rolls. He says he's stressed. Maya sobbed. He says I don't support him enough. Listen to me, I told her, holding her hands that weren't rough yet, and I would make sure they never got that way. Support is mutual. Love isn't a debt you pay. If he makes you feel like you owe him your happiness, he is stealing from you. Run. She broke up with him the next day. That victory felt better than the $1 million check. I still hear from Catherine. She's my best friend now. She comes up on weekends to drink wine on my porch and watch the ocean. She tells me about her cases. We laugh about Richard. Did you hear? She told me last week. Richard is running the prison infirmary. Well, she corrected, mopping it. He tried to tell the prison doctor how to set a bone and got sent to solitary for insubordination. We laughed until our sides hurt. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was a light, airy sound. And David, the carpenter, he's still here. He built a deck for the bakery. He didn't charge me. When I tried to pay him, he kissed me and said, cook me dinner, and we're even. He knows my story. He knows why I check the seals on my vitamin bottles. He knows why I keep my bank accounts separate. He doesn't mind. He says, scars just mean the skin is tougher there. Last month, I received a letter from the parole board. My mother is up for early release due to health issues. They wanted my statement. I sat at my kitchen table looking at the ocean. I thought about the pie. I thought about the have fun kids text. I wrote 2 sentences. Barbara Miller is a danger to the financial and physical safety of those she claims to love. I recommend she serve her full sentence. I mailed it. I didn't feel guilty. If you are listening to this and you are currently setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, stop. Look at the ash around your feet. Is that what love looks like? Look at the accounts. Look at the texts. Trust your gut. If you feel tired, if you feel drained, if you feel like you are disappearing, wake up. There is a yellow envelope waiting for everyone. You just have to be brave enough to fill it with the truth. My name is Laura Banks. I was a victim. I was a fool. But now I am the author of my own life. And let me tell you, the ending is beautiful. What do you think? Have you ever felt like you were disappearing for someone else's dream? Or maybe you've had your own moment of clarity, your own yellow envelope? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to know what this story means to you.